Today, we're unpacking the incredible, and honestly often overlooked, story of a founding father whose entire life was pretty much defined by relentless labor, deep personal sacrifice, and an absolute commitment to a brand new nation. We are looking at John Adams, and as you're about to see, the sheer amount of weight this man carried on his shoulders is absolutely wild.
But before we start at the beginning, we actually need to look at the very end. Picture this. The date is July 4th, 1826. John Adams is on his deathbed. And his family leader recalled that his final words were simply, "Thomas Jefferson survives." Now, there is a profound, almost cinematic irony to those words, because entirely unbeknownst to Adams, his longtime rival and friend, Thomas Jefferson, had actually passed away just a few hours earlier on that exact same day. It's this incredible historical mystery and just a really poignant end to a massive life. But to understand how we even got to that moment, we have to jump back in time. Section 1. The Constant Sojourners, from Braintree to the Revolution. You really can't talk about John Adams without talking about Abigail Adams, because their partnership completely set the stage for a lifetime of relentless travel. Born on October 30th, 1735, in Braintree, Massachusetts, John Adams started out as a farm boy. He attended a day school and Latin school, but you can see his rapid development almost immediately. By age 15, he's already starting his studies at Harvard. He initially rejects this idea of becoming a minister, works as a teacher for a little bit, and then pivots entirely to studying law. Once he gets that legal practice off the ground, he marries Abigail Smith in 1764. And over the next 5 decades, those two would raise 4 children and quite literally travel the world together. Moving into Section 2, Architect of Independence. Adams didn't just participate in the American Revolution, he was basically the primary engine behind it. And surprisingly, that reputation really kicked off when he made the highly controversial decision to defend British soldiers in the Boston Massacre. That intense dedication to the law gave him massive influence in shaping the early rebellion. Just 4 years later, in 1774, he heads to the First Continental Congress as a delegate from Massachusetts. And he definitely doesn't just sit quietly in the back of the room. He quickly emerges as this highly vocal leader for the pro-independence faction. And perhaps his most brilliant strategic move? He's the one who actually nominates George Washington of Virginia to command the Continental Army. That move perfectly tied the northern and southern colonies together in the fight. 90. Just take a second to process that number. 90. In 1776, John Adams served on the famous committee to prepare the Declaration of Independence. But that was just one committee. Throughout his time in Congress, he actually served on 90 different committees. It shows this relentless, grinding work ethic that is frankly hard to even comprehend today. He was constantly turning the gears to get this new government into motion. Section 3. The Relentless Diplomat. So by 1778, Congress realizes they desperately need international help, which meant sending Adams far away from his home to secure the nation's future. He was sent first to France and then over to the Netherlands. And while he was at The Hague, he pulled off something huge. He secured a highly crucial loan and opened the Netherlands to American trade. Then, working right alongside heavyweights like Benjamin Franklin, John Jay, and Henry Lawrence, Adams helped negotiate the Treaty of Paris. This was the big one, the treaty that officially ended the Revolutionary War and forced the globe to recognize the independence of the new nation. But it came at a personal cost. Between 1778 and 1788, Adams faced this massive disparity in his life. That huge 10-year span was spent almost entirely serving in formal diplomatic posts abroad, which even included becoming the first United States minister to Great Britain. He spent only a tiny, tiny fraction of that decade, just a few short months, back home in Massachusetts in 1779. But Adams being Adams, during that brief break, he went ahead and authored the Massachusetts State Constitution. And amazingly, that remains the longest-running state constitution in the nation today. Section 4. The Frustrations of Power. In 1789, Adams finally comes home, but he walks into a deeply frustrating reality. Think about this drastic contrast. On one hand, you have this dynamic diplomat who just spent a decade securing massive loans and world-altering treaties. But on the other, you now have a stagnant vice president. For 8 years under George Washington, Adams lived in political obscurity. As second in command, he was largely excluded from cabinet deliberations. And in his role as president of the Senate, his contributions were completely shunned. The senators even cruelly mocked his weight, dubbing this revolutionary giant his rotundity. When Washington retired and Adams stepped up as the second president, the reality of how the Adamses managed their official households was highly nuanced. Unlike the Virginian presidents before and after him, Adams did not own enslaved people. Instead, to maintain their homes and welcome guests, they hired white and free African American workers. They were both morally and politically opposed to slavery. However, the historical record shows they didn't avoid the institution entirely. They may have hired out enslaved African Americans to work in the vice president's and president's house. What that meant was they were paying wages directly to the owners of those enslaved people. It's a very complex picture of operating within the realities of their era.
And his presidency itself was incredibly complex. First off, in an attempt at continuity, Adams kept Washington's cabinet. Well, that backfired massively. Those secretaries actually took their orders from Alexander Hamilton, working behind the scenes to totally undermine Adams' foreign policy and his 1800 re-election campaign. Adding to all that turmoil, his presidency was deeply marred domestically by the Alien and Sedition Acts, which controversially targeted immigrants and political opponents. Yet amidst all of this chaos, he secured his ultimate triumph of peace. In 1800, he signed the Treaty of Montefontaine, ending the quasi-war with France and securing a peaceful trade relationship. Avoiding war with France was his primary diplomatic objective, and he achieved it, even though the treaty arrived too late to save his re-election. Which brings us to Section 5, Retirement and Legacy. After losing that election in 1800, Adams finally put an end to his constant sojourning and returned home to Peacefield in Quincy, Massachusetts. But retiring to the farm absolutely did not mean his mind stopped working. For the next 25 years, he maintained this vigorous written correspondence with friends and family. He served proudly as an elder statesman in Boston, and he even got to experience the ultimate joy of a father seeing his own son, John Quincy Adams, win the 1824 presidential election. He remained completely engaged with the nation that he had helped build from scratch. And now, our narrative comes right back full circle to where we started. July 4th, 1826. He passes away on the exact 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, the very document he had agonized over in one of his 90 committees half a century earlier. Uttering those famous final words about Jefferson, totally unaware his friend had just left the world right before him. So, I want to leave you with this question to chew on. How do we really measure the legacy of a constant sojourner? When you look at the relentless travel, the isolation, the massive political triumphs, and the heavy frustrations, what is the true cost of building a country? John Adams sacrificed a quiet life to ensure a loud, vibrant nation could exist. Take some time to think about that, and I highly encourage you to dive even deeper into his amazing story. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.